Roberto doesn't need much of an introduction. The international business community, at least the educational community, know him well as a master teacher. He is at Indiana University, long-term professor, full professor there. In fact, chairholder, Young Jin Kim Professor of International Business. And also Roberto leads the cyber there. He's the faculty director for cyber at Indiana University. We know Roberto is a master teacher, is an innovator, dedicated communicator. Roberto teaches at all levels, undergraduate, masters, and executive teaching very successfully around the world. He has a PhD from the University of Michigan and an MBA from University of Toledo. Roberto worked in industry before joining academia. He has held full-time positions with major companies, international companies as well. Roberto, you talked about GlobeSmart in previous webinars that we've had, and you gave us an overview, but we asked you to come back because we feel that this is a great tool for all of us teaching international business. It may take a little bit of investment on our part to learn about the basics and maybe experiment for a semester or two, but I think it's very applicable and it's a great way of enriching our courses and also a great way of engaging students. I think at this time and age when we are searching for new ways to keep our students engaged in the topic, in the subject matter, we need these online tools, and GlobeSmart is one of those. So I'm not going to say more about that because this is why we have you here. Thank you so much for coming back, and we'll turn it over to you. Welcome back, Roberto.
It's an honor and a pleasure to represent our own cyber at Indiana University, and on behalf of my cyber and Indiana University, I want to commend you and your team for doing such an amazing job of pivoting so quickly after we went on lockdown from the face-to-face environment in these pedagogy sessions, faculty development workshops, to the online format. You did an amazing job of pivoting, and we have been able to reach many, many more participants than in the face-to-face format. So it's been my pleasure to have participated in a few of these. And thank you once again. I went on the record to Hannah to let her know that I wanted to make this the most engaging and effective of all of the sessions. So thank you again, and let's get to it. I think you gave a pretty good introduction of GlobeSmart. It's been around for a long time, but what I found it very useful in engaging students to bring them the cultural aspects of international business in a sort of in a very interactive way, and also in a way that reflects what is actually going on in the business world. And so what I want to do is really cover four things in this presentation. One is to give an overview of GlobeSmart. Now, I'm not going to give a tutorial of the subtleties of how to use GlobeSmart or how it works, but rather what are some of the features, and then the cultural dimensions perspective, which is the way that that the information is structured around different cultural dimensions. And then there's a very useful section called the culture guides. So I'll give you a sense of what cultural information is covered there for almost 100 countries. And then the final part will be some ideas on how to incorporate GlobeSmart in the classroom. I've had a lot of success with it. My students have loved it. They keep asking for more. So that's really what I want to share. And by the way, as Tamir and I both said, it's been around for a long time, but we're not going to cover the details of how to use it. But as part of this session, at the very end, looking at one of the final slides of this slide deck, you will see that each participant will have an opportunity for a free month of unlimited usage of GlobeSmart so that you can try it on your own. All right, I'm not being paid by GlobeSmart. I'm not a GlobeSmart representative. I'm just somebody who discovered it for the classroom use. And then I want to share with you some of the ideas for making our international business teaching more effective. So a few years ago, I was teaching a group of MBA students, about 50 MBA students, in a career-oriented program in our MBA program called the Supply Chain Global Management Academy. And at that time, we were struggling because we were giving the students consulting projects, international business consulting projects, right? So how do we prepare them for the cultural aspects of international business? Also, we were working with them on securing international internships, both in the US and abroad. And then 50% of our students in this program were from outside of the US. So there were a lot of cultural differences among the student teams in our class. And so we could see that culture was impacting them, and we wanted to reach them to have a better understanding of how culture impacts teamwork and those kinds of topics. So that's how I began to discover it and began to incorporate it into our teaching. And from there, I have now included GlobeSmart in all of the courses that I teach. At the undergrad level, I teach a jumbo course, an Introduction to International Business course with up to 240 students. We use GlobeSmart for the cultural dimensions component of a general course on international business. And of course, we have courses that focus on a country or region of the world at the undergrad level. And then we also teach cross-cultural management here in smaller discussion-led courses. In our online MBA program, my MBA students love it, love GlobeSmart in my International Competitive Strategies course, because our cases are international and many of those have a cultural component, usually some kind of miscommunication or misunderstanding that's going on. And so they can use GlobeSmart to understand what's going on and develop recommendations. Cross-cultural management, of course, is a deep dive into motivation and decision-making and all of the deep topics relating culture. And so again, that's also a case-based course, and we use GlobeSmart to provide understanding there. And then, of course, I'm very active in taking students abroad. I've taken students to Chile, Brazil, Peru, India, China, and Australia. So for the preparation part and to help students understand what's going to happen culturally, GlobeSmart is a great tool. And then, of course, I've taught in other countries and have carried the use of GlobeSmart to help students understand the US or doing business with other countries too. So there are very many ways in which GlobeSmart can be incorporated with a little creativity into many assignments and different types of courses. And I'll share with you some other ideas. So what is GlobeSmart? It is a web tool. It's a subscription-based. It's a little pricey. You can easily get information on the academic subscription process. It's an online tool, but it's very business focused. When we discovered it here at Indiana University, it was not being used by universities. It was being used by multinational firms. And since then, we have adapted and increased the use through Aperion Global to the academic setting. It's a cultural information tool. So a lot of this information is packaged around cultural dimensions. You might be familiar with individualism and collectivism, or power distance, you know, the Hofstede cultural dimensions. There are many sets of dimensions. And so GlobeSmart uses 5 key dimensions. They're very similar to Hofstede's and the other academics, easy to use. And so when users began to explore GlobeSmart, they first respond to a questionnaire that's part of the tool, 40 questions. And this helps the user generate their own cultural profile on these 5 cultural dimensions. And then the tremendous value is that they can then compare their own personal profile on these 5 dimensions to almost 100 countries. So it's a huge set of countries that have profiles and cultural information. And of course, I'll share with you some of the business topics that might come up in a business setting that GlobeSmart keeps. To give you an idea of the specific topics that students can find easily on GlobeSmart, these are things like, what are China's core values and how does that impact business? What's the most effective leadership style in India? If I want to give a presentation to a Japanese audience, how do they like to receive the information? What's most effective for them in the presentation format? How can we effectively manage change across operations in France? How can we motivate innovation in Germany? There's a lot of information on motivation across different cultures, very, very useful. What are the pitfalls to transferring knowledge in Brazil? How do Mexicans perceive hierarchy in business situations? Travel to China, how does status and group orientation work in South Korea? And then if I'm engaging potential business partners in Turkey, for example, what are some safe small talk topics that I can start with to develop a positive relationship, and what might be some topics to avoid, right? Each country has its own small talk topics. I'll give you a little bit of time to see the number of countries organized by region that are covered in the GlobeSmart tool. And you'll see that all of the major countries of the world are represented here. Okay, it's and GlobeSmart continues to add countries as the use of the tool increases, and as they gain more cultural information and develop business partnerships in different countries, they continue to add countries. Just since I've been here at Indiana University, they've added Greece, they've added Peru, they've added a couple of other countries because of our request in the way that we want to use the tool. So you'll see here major regions and major countries, right? So the cultural dimensions approach. This is a key part of the GlobeSmart tool, and some of these slides are also, I'm sharing them as a way to communicate how I would cover, for example, cultural dimensions with my students. And this little graphic has been very useful for me in the past, in the sense that what I try to do here is communicate cultural dimensions as kind of like directions on a map. But it's a map of how to understand a culture and what are the cultural preferences of a particular country, a group of people here. So you see that some of these directions, dimensions are going to be very important. For example, North and South, right? Individualism and collectivism. East and West might be direct and indirect communication, but we also have equality and hierarchy, task versus relationship. So I like to get students thinking about, these are just preferences that have developed culturally over time. We can then bring in how culture works, different definitions of culture, but these are sort of directions. They're very important. They're very strong. They're not always thought of. People just sort of use them because they've worked. And it's not until something goes wrong that we begin to think of these directions. Now, there are many sets of cultural dimensions. I remember in my MBA training, we used to cover the work of Edward T. Hall, high context, low context, monochronic and polychronic cultures. Kluckhohn and Strudbach had many sets of dimensions. The most widely used one is Hofstede's, I think, individualism, collectivism, power distance, uncertainty avoidance, masculinity, femininity, long-term and short-term orientation. But there are many, many others. Trompenars, the Globe study, very useful. And then my MBA students have really liked the work, recent work of Erin Meyer. She's a US academic stationed in France at INSEAD. And so she has a book called The Culture Map, several nice articles in Harvard Business Review, and several nice videos also. But it's the same thing. It's the cultural dimensions. It's her own set. Some of these are very similar to Hofstede's and the others. This is another little table that I've created for many of my classes, again, to warm up the students to understand cultural dimensions. And what I've done here is I've created and highlighted in red font here the major labels of some of the most widely used dimensions. And you also see there's an arrow at the top that points both ways. This is to demonstrate a sort of continuum, right? from left to right, and these are opposite dimensions. And when you see an equal sign, this means that it's the same label, but it's the same dimension, but with a different label, depending on the author, right? And so then I give a short description. So this is just to help the students begin to become familiar with cultural dimensions. Now, another tool that I want to share here is videos. So sometimes I've been accused in my classes of making stuff up related to culture when I talk about cultural differences between Mexico and the US, or between Latin America and Europe, for example. So videos, right? Finding something that is packaged for the general audience or for the business world. And so I try to find videos that talk about culture, and I have two that I want to share with you. These are very short, and I want to show you one from CNN called Lost in Translation. You can also meet Erin Meyer here. She's being interviewed by Fareed Zakaria on CNN's Global Public Square. So let me just play it, and what she's going to be talking about is some cultural differences between the US and France, and the US and China. And then it's really about the cultural dimensions. That's why I included here. So let me go ahead and play the first video. Not all of it, but let's try it.
In today's globalized economy, you might be an American doing business in Rwanda, a French woman making a deal with Japan, or an Argentine trying to woo a new customer in Australia. You can do your business over the phone via Skype or hop on a plane. That's the easy part. The tough part is figuring out how to conduct yourself in a different culture. Is it Americans who don't like criticism and Germans who don't want you to mince words, or is it the other way around? And do you bow or not bow with your Japanese counterparts? Erin Meyer is a professor at INSEAD, an international business school with campuses all over the world. She is the author of The Culture Map. So Americans are fascinated by the world, but what we really want to know is what do they think of us? Right. In this map, what are the traits that you think of, and you live in France now, so you have a good perspective, what are the traits that people think of as distinctively American when it comes to doing business and interacting?
Well, one thing that you brought up a moment ago was this tendency to give a lot of positive feedback, and that might come off as being superficial or just confusing to people from other countries. So as you said, I've lived in France now for 15 years, and in France people are trained to give positive feedback a lot more implicitly and to give negative feedback a lot more bluntly than we do in the U.S. And I worked with a French client a while ago who had moved to the U.S. She had a new American boss. Her American boss called her into his office to tell her that her performance was unacceptable. But he started by telling her, in the way we do in the U.S., the things he felt she was doing well. And then by the time he got to the real message, she wasn't even listening anymore. She left that meeting thinking, wow, this was the best feedback I've ever received. So leaders today need to be, managers, all of us, need to be really aware of these cultural differences.
And flip it around. So if an American goes to France or Germany, they will tend to, they give a presentation, and the German might say, well, these were the 4 things I didn't like about what you do. He'd be right, blunt, and upfront about the disagreement, right?
It can be very surprising for an American, and when you're first getting used to it, it can be unsettling.
And what do you think of as some of the other dominant characteristics that, in other countries that people should be aware of? For example, if you're doing business in China, what would be the kind of key Chinese cultural, traits?
Well, one might be, when should you speak and when should you be quiet? And that's a very simple thing that we learn in our own cultural environment when we're children. I had a team I was working with recently where I had a group of Americans and 1 Chinese on the team. The Americans were all jumping in, talking on top of each other, and the Chinese person just sat quietly. Afterwards, I asked them how the meeting had gone. One of the Americans had said, well, this Chinese guy, he doesn't have anything to contribute. He's really shy. And I spoke to the Chinese, and he said, well, I can't find an opportunity to speak in all of this chaos and jumping in. Just knowing when to be quiet can help.
A friend of
Okay, I won't play the rest of it, but you can find Erin Meyer's work. You can Google it and find her work on the web. She has several very nice presentations. You can see there that the example she's giving, they can be connected to the major cultural dimensions that are going to impact leadership, communication style across countries, information processing, motivation, and on, right? The topics that are covered in our textbooks. I want to show you the next video that is also related to Erin Meyer's culture map, but this one is a little bit more direct because it begins to plot countries, place countries in space in relation to these dimensions. So let me play it again, very short, and I'll play the whole thing. This is covering confrontation across cultures, expressiveness, and trust building, right? Very important topics.
You might be a star negotiator in your own country, but in today's global economy, your skills may not automatically translate to other cultures. For instance, in some cultures, it's entirely appropriate to show emotion during a negotiation, to raise your voice, laugh passionately, or even put a friendly arm around your counterpart. In others, this much expression not only feels intrusive or surprising, but may be viewed as immature or unprofessional. Then there's open disagreement. Negotiators often assume that more expressive cultures are also more confrontational, but that isn't always the case. In some countries, such as France and Israel, emotions pour out, including disagreement. But for other very expressive cultures, such as Brazil, Mexico, and Saudi Arabia, open disagreement could be seen as insulting. Some less expressive cultures, such as Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, see open disagreement and debate as positive and necessary, as long as it's expressed calmly and factually. Others tend to be both less emotional and non-confrontational, which means you'll have to be especially attuned to subtle cues for both positive and negative responses. It's also important to learn how others build trust. There are two distinct types, cognitive and affective, and in a business setting, the dominant type of trust varies from one culture to another. Cognitive trust is task-based. It comes from the head and is built on your counterpart's accomplishments, skills, and reliability. American culture offers a good example of this kind of trust. In the United States, getting too emotionally close to a business counterpart is seen as unprofessional, and mixing the personal and professional is seen as risky. Affective trust is relationship-based and comes from the heart. It arises from the feelings of emotional closeness, empathy, and friendship that are developed gradually through sharing meals, evening drinks, and coffee breaks. In China, for instance, negotiators are unlikely to trust their counterparts until an effective connection has been made. Adapting your negotiation approach accordingly will help you get to yes, or si, ja, oui, hi, and da.
All right, isn't that a good video? I mean, it just visually helps you make the connections, right? Culture, as I tell my students, is not about an objective reality of interactions, right? There's a lot of hidden meanings that we're not even aware of until we explore further. So once I get the students to understand, the idea of cultural dimensions and how these work, then we begin using the ones that are part of GlobeSmart. And so it's only 5. That's the other thing that students really like about it. Independent and interdependent, similar to individualism and collectivism. Egalitarian in status, remember power distance. Risk and certainty, that's uncertainty avoidance. Direct and indirect, right? And task and relationship orientation. Now, one thing that I found on GlobeSmart is a little sets of diagrams, visuals, that make it easy to connect with sort of the meaning of each of these labels. You can see there the blue and the orange are opposites, independent, interdependent. You can just see by the quick cartoon there what they're trying to communicate. You can go very far in exploring the subtleties of the definitions of each of these dimensions, but you can see here at a glance what they're referring to. Risk and certainty. Direct and indirect communication. Indirect is about beating around the bush, and it's about avoiding conflict, and it's about diplomacy, right? Versus saying what you mean and meaning what you say. And then task and relationship makes a lot of sense to my students. Some people get right down to business. They don't need much time to warm up. And in other countries, you have to really warm up, do a lot of small talk, and establish a sense of trust before you can move on to doing any work. All right, So what I want to do now is take you, I have some screenshots that I'm not going to take you directly to GlobeSmart, but these are GlobeSmart, these are screenshots that show you the different features here of what you would experience once you activate your trial version. Down here, you see that this is where you can pull up a country. This is a great way to begin. Find the country you're interested in, and then you can do a profile comparison. Once you log into the tool, your profile will already be there once you answer the 40 questions, and then you can compare your profile to a particular country. You can see I've selected Peru here. And then on the left side, these are the different topics that relate to culture and business, packaged in a very intuitive, easy to access way. And I'll show you some of the topics a little bit later. So how does GlobeSmart use the profiles, right? The cultural dimensions. Well, a quick way is to present the country and to present the information related to, you know, the thousands of people who have responded to the survey that are now part of the, that's now part of the GlobeSmart information related to that culture, that country's average profile. So what you'll see whenever you start looking at country profiles is that the flag of the country and the name of the country will be at the top. And then with little green squares, or different color, but always a square, you will see the connection or the standing of that particular country on the 5 GlobeSmart dimensions, right? Now, what's very useful is to take that country and to develop your own profile. Actually, the person's profile would be created first, then you can access other countries. So you can see that person X here tends to be pretty individualistic, tends toward egalitarian, risk-taking, direct in communication, and task-oriented, right? But here's the value, right? You can now compare person X profile to a particular country, and you can do this for multiple countries. You can also, as part of the tool, you can decide to keep your profile, or if you're just interested in comparisons between countries, you can easily, by clicking a button, eliminate your own profile. So now we can compare 3 countries that do a lot of business with each other and see how far apart they are on some of these dimensions, like egalitarian and status, and then risk-taking and task versus relationship. All right. Now, because I teach a global business environments class with over 500 students each term, one of the things that I like to stress is the number of countries that are represented in my typical class. And it really is sort of bringing the world to Bloomington, Indiana, at least when we meet face to face. Right now we're doing, right now on campus, we're doing hybrid, right? Some online courses and a little bit of face to face. But when we have the full face-to-face experience, we have all of these different countries represented in a typical class. This is my Global Business Environments class in the fall of 2019. You can see here that a huge number of countries represented here. You can see the number of students. And then I like to present the results in a pie chart, right? And then I also like to show them a map of the world of the countries represented here. 19 countries all brought together for one class, representing a huge percentage of the world's population here. But what I'm really trying to do is get them to think about what are the cultural dimensions of all of these different countries? And if we were all part of one company, for example, what would our meetings be like? What would decision-making be like? What would be our different ideas of leadership, effective leadership? And so I want to show you some of the profiles of these countries, but I want to do something even better. So here is again, the screenshot of the main page. These are the dimensions. This is, remember, this is a balanced country. This is a make-believe country, but you'll see that some countries are pretty balanced toward the middle. So Hannah had a really good idea. She said, what if we take the list of participants that are registered for today's session? I know not everybody's here, but the participants who registered, what if we took the country of residence of today's participants, listed the number of countries, you can see the countries represented here, and then let's show the regions of the world that are covered by our participants. Here they are. And then let's see if we can explore the cultural profiles from GlobeSmart of all of these different countries. All right, so that's what we're going to do. So we'll start with the U.S. I've presented the countries here in order of the greatest number of participants to lowest number of participants, right? So U.S., UK, Brazil. Yeah, Brazil is number 3, Canada, Indonesia. Let me run quickly through them. India, Mexico, Netherlands, Norway, Oman, Peru, Poland. All of the countries that were in GlobeSmart, all of the countries that of residents of participants were here. Another thing we could do is get the country of origin, right? The nationality of all the participants and create the profiles. Now, I want to show you something that I do regularly in class. I want to show you the same profiles, but now I'm going to order them in order of distance from the USA, right? So closest to the USA to furthest from the USA, to give the students a sense of the variance of a particular group, right? Cultural variance. So the US, Canada, UK. Now we can talk about patterns, cultural patterns, and ease of doing business. Norway, Netherlands, Finland, Austria. Now from here on, we move to the middle and then all the way to the right side. Puerto Rico, Brazil, Mexico, Turkey, Peru, Colombia, Egypt, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Oman, Vietnam, Taiwan, and then Thailand is the furthest away. So I do this with my students also, and they really like this. They really like this approach, and it makes sense for them. Now, so that's the cultural dimensions profile, and then the profiles and the plots, right? Students learn very quickly how to generate their own plots, copy and paste them into a report or a presentation to talk about the issues in a case or in a consulting project, for example, and develop recommendations. Now, to get the information about what these dimensions mean, then we can go to a section of GlobeSmart called the Culture Guide section. And again, 100 countries here almost have their own culture guide. So when you go to the home page, when you select a particular country, it starts out by showing you the flag, the name of the country, and a typical sort of picture. You can see Peru here captures Machu Picchu, the local time in Peru, the weather. You can even find the exchange rate, right? And lots of current news. You can pull up local newspapers in English or in several different languages. I think GlobeSmart has 8 to 10 languages where the information is presented in different languages. And then you can see a map of where this country fits into a region of the world. So what might be, or how is the information that relates to leadership and leading people, communicating, around these cultural dimensions, where is that located? It's located in different, around different topics. Some of these are general topics like core knowledge, business protocol, traveling, so these are local inclusion and diversity, but then most of the information is directly related about business situations, how to lead people effectively, communicating effectively, relationship building, working with customers and suppliers, and how to exchange business cards, right? Small talk, those kinds of, what is the protocol in this country? And then also one area I'm not going to cover a lot, but you can explore it on your own. Students can use GlobeSmart as a learning assessment tool, so they can quiz themselves once they've covered some of these topics. I wanted to go a little bit further and show you some of the topics under core knowledge: history of the country, holidays and business calendar, demographics and religion, core values, government structure and politics. So these are some general topics. Again, each country has coverage of all of these topics. And then to give you a sense of the business related topics, right? This is how that information is presented. Effective leadership style. When I say presented, these are just bullet points. When you click on each of these boxes, which we're not going to do here, that's when you get the paragraph by paragraph explanation, examples, even videos. You can get videos with experts to communicate, to explain how things work in their country, right? So you can go very deep in very specific information. And what I've done here on this slide is the same sort of culture guide topics, and each of these titles will be hyperlinks. So you can go directly, if you want to know about how to greet people in Peru, you would just click on greetings and it takes you there. Business cards, gift giving, you know, on and on. So it's very, very specific to the business setting. The students at first think that this is like a textbook type academic theoretical site, and then they realize how useful it is. Okay, in a few more minutes, I want to turn the corner now and just share with you some examples of how to use GlobeSmart in teaching to enhance international business teaching, and then we'll open it up for Q&A with Tamir's help. So this is a great tool for country analysis reports. You might know country analysis by some acronyms like STEEP, PESTEL, PEST, the CAGE framework that stands for country, culture, administrative, geographic, and economic distance. These are all the same thing, right? It's about analyzing a particular country in order to get students to understand what adaptations need to be made if a company were to enter and do business in that country. So what I do in my classes, if I'm assigning country analysis report, I use GlobeSmart exclusively for the culture part, and then tell the students to go elsewhere, perhaps to Global Edge for the political system, the economic system, the financial topics. You can use this as an individual or team assignment, a research paper or a presentation format. It also is good to combine it with courses that travel to the countries that are being researched here. It's good to have clear directions and rubrics so that the students can hit the mark. And you can see here some of the topics that I've had students research on Peru. I give them some suggested topics that they have to include in their report or their presentation. Okay, this is part of the Peruvian country analysis related to culture. Study abroad. We use this GlobeSmart to prepare students to do study abroad. So what are the steps that I might recommend here? I would have students create their own profile, compare it to their home country, and then to compare their profile to the host country. And then from there, they can begin to identify the largest gaps that they might come up between their personal profile and the host country. Research and understand the potential impacts of the host country, so they can then focus on their courses and the work that they have to do and not be so caught off guard by the cultural aspects. And then of course, get them to develop strategies for flexing their own style and to begin to adapt even before they travel to the country. So very useful. They can use it before they get there or while they're in country to understand what's going on. Cross-cultural business cases. I like to select cases that have real-world problems that are challenging, right? Miscommunication, people getting upset with each other, missed meetings because of time zone issues, those kinds of things, email communication. And so you can see here some of the titles of the cases that I tend to use. Leading a cross culture at Michelin. It's about a French manager who has to come from France and manage in Greenville, South Carolina. So his leadership style has a tremendous number of clashes with the blue collar workers in the southern part of the US. Siemens AG is about the differences in culture between Germany, India, and the US. Emerson Electric, the US and China. Trouble in Paradise, the US and China. managing a global team is really interesting. Greg James at Sun Microsystem, because it's all about the problems encountered in 4 countries. Teams, one team, but located in 4 countries. The UAE, India, the US, and France, right? Tremendous differences. Preparing students for an expat assignment, or MBA students, for example, to do an international internship. Similar idea here is to develop your profile, understand the country's profile, understand the gaps, and then develop strategies for recommendations. And some of these I combined with videos about expats, like Outsourced, a US manager in India. Shanghai Calling is about an American-born Chinese manager in China. And then Office Equipment Company is about, it's a very short case that evaluates 5 candidates, 3 from the US, 1 from Mexico, and 1 from Peru, for a manufacturing assignment in Lima, Peru. And so, you know, GlobeSmart can be used to develop strategies for each type of candidate to be effective from a cultural perspective. So there are many opportunities to explore the expatriate assignment. The other thing that I like to do in class is I like to pick a student, preferably a student who is skeptical about the impact of culture. And I want to put them a little bit on the spot. And I want to say, okay, if your profile was very similar, you're from the US, you're from Indianapolis, Indiana, for example. If your profile is similar to the US, and let's say we promoted you and to all of Asia, country manager or regional manager of all of these Asian operations, Singapore, India, Thailand, Philippines, Japan, you see the list here. Let's say we sent you to Singapore or Hong Kong, and you are going to have all of these country managers report to you. What do you think is going to be your daily routine in terms of meetings, giving assignments, communicating with all of your country managers, right? And so I'll have the student tell me what he or she thinks is likely to happen. And then more importantly, I can then invite other class members to give some ideas, and students very, very quickly begin to generate scenarios and situations that illustrate in a live class session very effectively how culture is going to impact, you know, a manager coming from a very different culture, right? And so very useful here. Again, the idea is to put students in an expat situation. And then I mentioned that one of the classes that I taught with consulting projects had to do with students from different countries, 50-50 between domestic and international students. So this is a very useful tool to get students to share their profiles with each other, create a plot of all of the team members, right? And then to begin to get them to discuss how their teamwork is going to be impacted by cultural differences, their communication style, their communication preferences, decision-making, risk-taking, relationship versus task orientation, giving and receiving feedback, resolving conflict, establishing and judging credibility. Again, we want them to succeed on their deliverables or consulting projects and not beat each other up and have a difficult time. Is easy to happen because of cultural differences. So GlobeSmart can be used as that type of cultural awareness and cultural global competency enhancement tool. So, okay, so I've given you a lot of information quickly about what GlobeSmart is, the cultural dimensions, and where cultural information is located. What you can do from here is try out your own version. So when you get the lecture slides, if you just copy and paste this this link, this will take you to a website that will allow you to set up a 1-month trial at no cost so that you can explore GlobeSmart using all of the full features of GlobeSmart. So you will have complete access, full access for 1 month, and you can use it as many times as you want. This link is when you want to return to it at a later time. And then GlobeSmart has a very useful help section, right? Tutorials, videos, and then direct support. So enjoy with our compliments, enjoy your use of GlobeSmart. And if GlobeSmart isn't for you, or let's say you don't have the resources for the subscription, there are other websites available where the cultural dimensions would apply here. Hofstede has their Hofstede Insights is based on Hofstede's cultural dimensions, and you can use that. That has a lot of free features. The Globe Project, Aaron Meyer's country mapping tool, some of it is free and some of it you have to pay for. And then Fons Trompenaars has his own website, and you can find others like this too. So anything else? Let's go ahead and open it up for questions with Tamir's help, but feel free to contact me anytime for other ideas on how to incorporate it into teaching. So thank you very much. Thanks everyone. Tamir, what should we do here?
Thank you so much. It was packed full of information, insights. I have a few questions in terms of, for example, how do we get started? How do we gear up to use this regularly in our classes? What kind of investment does it take on any one colleague's part? But I'm sure you were expecting this question. Dina asks about assessment of and grading. I mean, so with every exercise, engagement, a tool like this, there's the challenge of assessing the student's performance, either individually or as a group. What do you do on that? We can perhaps start with that question.
So the first thing that I do, Dina and others, is I want to have a clear idea of what I want the students to look for. So it's usually a case or a country analysis. What I try to do is provide first clear directions, right? What am I expecting? And then I give some suggested topics so that the students aren't kind of fishing around looking everywhere. I want them focused on the major topics. And then I might create a quick tutorial on how to create a profile, how to create and present your profile. And then a very important part of any assignment for me is rubrics. I want to show them on one page how many points, you know, grammar and typos count, as well as the depthness of their analysis, and also the you know, the importance and the value, the practicality of their recommendation. So I think, you know, anything that's related to any type of assignment, that's very important here. What I find is, as you will see when you try the 1-month subscription, is that it's very intuitive, so the students can find the information very, very quickly. Now, I think I have a, are you able to see, Tamir,
Yes.
a
Yes,
slide
yeah.
here? I want to show you something that I've invested quite a bit of time and related to something I've been talking about here. Okay, so this is a set of questions. Again, I don't mean for you to use my questions, but rather how I develop questions to focus the student's attention. So the module 2 write-up questions are from one of my classes where I start with having the students read about the cultural dimensions. Hofstede, Schwartz, Trompenaars, Globe Study, Clarkon, and Strobeck. So I want them first to explain what those are trying to illustrate. And then which ones were most useful to you? How do you understand the concept of cultural distance, which is covered in our textbook, right? And then I want to ask them to read Aaron Meyer's Navigating the Cultural Minefield article, and then use that to react to what they've learned from the textbook. And then now here's where I point them to GlobeSmart. Okay, now go to GlobeSmart. How would you compare the GlobeSmart dimensions to the ones that you've read in the textbook and the ones that you find most useful? What do you think of Aaron Meyer's work? Or how would you compare GlobeSmart to Aaron Meyer's work? And then I would have them stay on GlobeSmart and generate their profile, pick a country, compare their profile to the country, and then talk about that. So this is just one assignment that might be 3 to 4 pages long, where they have to read the material, compare several of these items, and then write a write-up. And then, of course, I would use the rubric in order to grade it and assign the points. So there's a lot of work also in using a tool like this effectively. So I hope that helps, Tamir.
Yes, it does. Thank you so much. A quick question, Roberto, perhaps. Waving asks, do you think we should buy the premium version of the GlobeSmart for teaching? And this is subscription basis, right? It's an ongoing subscription, or is it a one-time license?
It's ongoing. We pay a yearly subscription. Although you will see that that the academic version has many options, and many of those have been created as a result of our work here. When I first began to use it, the year-long enterprise license was too expensive. So what we did is we paid for a number of licenses based on the size of the class. When the class was ended, then the subscription went away. Next class would come in, we'd develop let's say one class, one course, or 1 year subscription, but based on the number of students. So there are many, many different options. What I would do is try the full version for a month, and then see how it would work, see if it would make sense, see if you would have the resources. At this point, what has happened, but over many years, over like a 15-year period, is we went from a particular class to a number of students to convincing other faculty to use it. And then at some point, with this groundswell of use, we went to the dean, and the dean agreed to provide funds for an enterprise license. And then now there's a combination of the business school and our university library system adopting it on a year-to-year basis. Actually, we've gone further. We've developed a 3-year contract in order to reduce the cost. So it's very flexible, but a lot depends on how you want to use it, how many people want to use it, and what resources you have available. I can tell you that in many classes, we could not, the university and our business school would be in a very difficult situation because students now depend on it and faculty depend on it. If it went away, there would be a major disruption in our assignments and in my own courses. So
interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for that as well. Osrian asks, does the tool allow comparison and suggestions for more than 2 cultures involved at a time? And I think you answered this. If we have cross-cultural team of 3 or 4 diverse cultures, would the tool help understanding how these diverse cultures could do to satisfy everyone's cultural needs?
Yes, so this would have, so this diagram here shows, all of these different Asian countries. I think you can do up to 9 countries on one page, right? And you would start there. Then what you could do is find information. There are certain sections that have to do with flexing your style or developing, fostering inclusion and smooth relations across cultures. So starting with the dimensions and the differences, the gaps between countries, you can then quickly find information on how to develop strategies for bridging these cultural differences and then fostering a type of inclusion, including there was a useful tool that my students have used a lot called How to Foster Global English I didn't know there was a thing as Global English, but there is, and it makes a lot of sense. How to stay away from slang and jargon and technical terms so that people who speak English as their second or third language can gain a higher level of understanding if you have people from different countries together. Mm-hmm. Also with the lockdowns and the move toward virtual work, there's always been information on virtual teams, but I've noticed that GlobeSmart has included much more information on working at a distance and working from home and working on virtual teams.
Excellent. Roberto, a couple of more questions. We're running out of time here, but in your own experience, does it work better as a group assignment or individual assignment, or what is the student's preference? Do they like to do the tasks on their own as an individual or in groups?
Both. I've included individual assignments and group assignments in one class, for example. It just depends on what I want the students to do. And even with travel courses, sometimes I've had the students research the information by teams, right? Somebody do culture, somebody do, or this aspect of culture versus that aspect of culture. And at other times I've had every student research every topic. It's just your preference. It's your preference and how you want to use the tool and what your individual goals are.
And did you ever collaborate with a colleague, educator from another country who was also using the GlobeSmart and maybe brought together teams of students, cross-cultural teams?
No, but this would be very helpful. So the challenge would be making sure that everybody has access to the tool. Actually, I have a colleague who is teaching in Myanmar, and what she wanted to do was connect students in the US with students in Myanmar, and then she was able to get GlobeSmart to give her students in Myanmar access for the time that the class was running. And she was able to use that as a tool. She's gearing up to do that, but I haven't done that myself. And she's very hopeful that the Myanmar students are going to be able to understand the US students better. And they're part of the same class, but she wants to use it in a way to enhance cross-cultural understanding between the two sets of students. But yeah, it can definitely be used in that way.
Roberto, thank you so much for another very informative, very helpful, very practical webinar. And I'm sure colleagues are going to take these good ideas and be inspired and try to implement it in their own environments.